Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Katrina Morrison, and I am in Collinsville, Oklahoma. I teach school in Skiatook, Oklahoma. Today is January 23rd, 2021, and I am interviewing Donnetta. And Donnetta, will you tell us your full name and where you are?
I'm Donnetta Norris. I live in Mansfield, Texas, and I teach in Arlington, Texas.
Wonderful. And we are doing this for the Oral History Project titled COVID-19 Teacher, Poets, Writing to Bridge the Distance, which will be archived by Oklahoma State University Oral History Research Program. So, hello, Donnetta, again.
Hi, Katrina.
Will you just tell me a little bit about how you became an educator?
I started my career as a paraprofessional in the media center, so I got to know all the kids, which was absolutely amazing. After I had my son in 2007, I decided to go back to school to get my teaching degree. We're a military family, so we moved a lot. And becoming a teacher just seemed, number one, a good way to stay employed. But I had so much fun just being with the kids when I would see them in the media center that I knew that education was really what I wanted to do. So I got my degree from Western Governors University, a teacher through a teacher program, a teacher certification program. And honestly, the rest was history. I started teaching my first job in January 2009 for a teacher who was actually deploying with her husband, and I took over her classroom. I had a student taught in her classroom. So it was almost like just kind of sliding right into a position that I almost seemed like was made for me because I knew the students and I had worked with them. So it was a seamless transition.
Good. And was that there in Texas?
That was actually in Hinesville, Georgia.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because you said since you're a military family, I expect you relocate frequently.
Yes, we relocated. So far during my teaching career, we've relocated about 2 or 3 times. So I've taught in Georgia, I've taught in Hawaii, and now we're pretty much stable and retired. And so I'm teaching here in Texas.
Well, good. Can you tell me a little bit about the context of your school now?
Right now, we are teaching in a hybrid model. So I teach at an elementary school, second graders. Our hybrid model basically is there are some scholars in the classroom, and then there are some scholars at home, but instruction is still via Microsoft Teams. And so 2 times a day, I do live instruction. And then the students will receive their independent practice in all the content areas via Seesaw. That is what the district has decided to use for students K-2. Mm-hmm. So there's some synchronous and some asynchronous learning going on.
Okay. And is this public school?
This is a public school, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And about how big is your school?
Right now, we probably have almost 400 students enrolled, whether they're coming in the building or they're at home. So total enrollment about 400. We usually have about 500 or more. But of course, coronavirus, COVID-19 just kind of changed things a little bit. So, but we are pre-K through 6 in my district.
And that's in Arlington, and Arlington is kind of part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're going to document the impact of COVID-19 on educators and education. So let's go back to the spring of 2020.
Okay.
How did you learn that teachers in your state would be teaching remotely, or that buildings would be closing, or otherwise?
Initially, so we were on spring break. Mm-hmm. So I had an entire week off, and the school year had honestly been a bit rough just due to some other things that were that had happened. And so I had taken the mindset to just kind of rest during spring break so I could be like ready to go when we went back. And then around the 13th of March, we received the email from our principal to make sure we read an email from our superintendent that they were making plans that with the current guidelines of COVID-19 to figure out how we were going to do school. And initially, it was stated that we were not going to close. A couple of days later, it was, okay, we're going to be closed for the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And then it rolled out, we're going to be closed until April 3rd.
Yeah.
And then we never opened back up.
Yeah.
So a lot of emails. Our district is very good at interviewing our superintendent. So he created a video that we were kind of able to watch and get more clarification. But they were very good at communicating with us and keeping us abreast of what was happening.
Well, that's great. The idea of being able to see him.
Yes.
Or her. I guess it's a him, right?
Him, yes.
Okay. I thought so. Okay. Well, good. Yeah, that sounds very familiar to me too. Review the, sorry. 1 second here. Let me see. Oh, yeah. In what ways did you participate in shaping any policies? In other words, did teachers really have a say in the policies that were developed about distance learning? And what were the initial losses or concerns?
We as teachers, to my knowledge, did not have much say. It seemed as if the district just decided that the individuals at the district level would pretty much, figure out how to do school. And they rolled it out to us and said, okay, here's how we're going to do this phase. We had 3 different phases. So each phase was kind of rolled out to us as we went along. And so basically, I really can speak to, I was never, asked or to shape any policy. We just received instructions and pretty much just started rolling with it. Yeah, that just totally mirrors my experience too. The oral history project emerged from poetry teachers. Excuse me, let me start that over. The oral history project emerged from poetry that teachers wrote during the early days of social distancing. How did poetry and writing poetry fit into your life in those early days of the pandemic? Initially, I wasn't writing poetry. I was notebooking every day, just thoughts and feelings and what was going on. And I had actually written just kind of a notebook entry of just what I called it was called not Shelter in Place, but Stranger Things. I called it Stranger Things because it just seemed so strange that I don't know, I was expecting to go back to work after spring break and then we weren't going back to school. And it was almost like a kind of a 2-week period before we really knew exactly what we were going to be doing. So it felt strange. And then I got information about the Open Right Verse Love. I think it was at the beginning of April. And that's kind of where the poetry kind of started to flow during this time.
Mm-hmm. Could you share a poem from that time and talk a bit about it?
Yeah. I have a poem called Shelter in Place.
Oh, yeah.
It's an ethery, which I've recently learned just through, learning about a little bit about poetry. It's just 10 lines and each stanza has 1 syllable that matches each line. Or a syllable that matches each line, I should say. So this one is called Shelter in Place and it's home, inside, staying safe. Sanity wanes, online learning links, Zoom video meetings, writing to clear my mind, stretching myself with poetry, uncertain of what will come of it, hoping others will shelter in place too. Mm-hmm. And that poem just came from a place of, uncertainty, just not quite knowing what was going to happen. And I think at that time, shelter in place was kind of the buzzword in, around the country, just shelter in place, stay home, social distance. And so just wanted to get that feeling out. And that was the form that just kind of allowed me to express just the hope in, can we all do the right thing while we're going through this? So
I think I remember this when we were participating. I think I remember your poem. What strikes me about it is that you use words that are so specific to our time.
Yeah.
Like the idea of shelter in place, Zoom, video. I mean, things that words, phrases we didn't use before.
Yes.
And I also noticed the lack of punctuation. And so, can you say something about that?
I am actually part of a writing group that I started meeting with to write, and it's we have kind of a little joke that we're kind of writing rebels, and so we kind of talk about how our writing is our writing, that we have permission to do it the way we want to, and it was really just a matter of I think with that poem it was just a matter of feeling like none of this is ending, so I just chose not to put a period because we didn't know how long this was going to last.
That is so poignant. Wow, that is just amazing. Is there a word or a phrase? I guess the shelter in place would be the word that sticks out the most, but you can tell me. I mean, to me, that's what it is. But what about you?
I think the line "sanity wanes" really was at that moment kind of, I guess, where my mind was as I was writing it, because I'm a routine. I like routines. I like, I get up at a certain time. I do things a certain way. And so initially, it was just strange. And everything was affected by the sheltering in place and how many people could congregate. And so a lot of things just kind of got discombobulated, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so it was a bit of a struggle for me to kind of get my mind into, okay, this is going to be a little bit of what we now know is the new normal at the time. And it's like, okay, I had to, so my sanity waned a little bit because everything just was not the way I was used to it. And I'm pretty sure that's the same for so many people. But I think that line right there was just speaks to, okay, I was trying to keep it together. I really was.
Right. And has that gotten better or worse?
It has gotten better. A lot of the restrictions that were placed on our state with gatherings and different things have changed. And I work out with an organization that was meeting outside anyway. So we were not inside a building or inside a gym. But when some of the restrictions got lifted, I was able to kind of go back to some of my normal routines with working out and different things like that. So it has helped. It has definitely helped with having some of my scholars back in the classroom, because, the year ended with me not seeing any of my scholars from last school year. So those things that were important to me have kind of resumed, but in a different way. So it does. Yes, it has changed and it has definitely helped.
Well, that's a great transition to our next question, which asks basically, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay.
Talk a bit about how your state responded and its impact on your school and your school community. So it sounds like, to me anyway, that things have lightened up some, but you can go ahead and explain.
They have lightened up some. So initially there was the deciding to close and the sheltering in place and different things like that were, statewide. And of course, impacted our school, the school district, and a lot of things that happened just in life in general. But in that, as guidelines changed, different things changed. And so we were trying to keep up with what we could and what we could not do. A lot more communication via email, of course, because we could not meet together. Teachers were at home. Even as the end of the school year started to kind of close out, I think our principal was pretty much administrating from home. Mm-hmm. So there was just a lot of different guidelines and communications to try to, filter through. Of course, we had gone from in-person instruction to a phase of basically send this information to your parents. They have access to an online learning hub, and this is where they'll get their activities and learning for their scholars. Mm-hmm. And then it transitioned into, okay, the district has created a plethora of activities and lessons via Seesaw and Canvas. Let your parents know that you will be sending these out. And then eventually it rolled into, now you're going to create these lessons and then send them out. And so it changed through the 3 phases. And that was the biggest impact it had with our district, is just them having to figure out how we were going to do this. And then I guess helping us to, giving us time to understand, okay, here's how the phases work, and this is what we're going to do for our parents and our scholars. And so it was a bit chaotic, but we made it through. It was a bit chaotic initially, but we made it.
Yeah. So let's go back to maybe right after that first announcement, when after spring break, and, I can certainly relate to that, but what is your strongest memory? If you have a memory, what's your strongest memory of teaching during those early days of the pandemic? If there's one that stands out.
There were 2 specific. One was a bit selfish because we were, of course, learning a totally new way of trying to provide instruction. And there was a guideline that we could do Zoom meetings with our scholars. And I was just so nervous, like, I don't know. I didn't know how best to implement that. And so I kind of felt some kind of way about that. But I think honestly, the biggest memory was wondering, are our families going to be okay? Because our school is a Title I school, which is a low social economic status for most of the families that we serve, predominantly Hispanic and African American. And so I just wondered if they would be okay, how were my scholars going to eat? Because most of them receive free and reduced lunch. As a matter of fact, we had rolled out a plan last year where our entire school received free lunch, which was great. So I know a lot of parents relied on that. And so I just wondered, and it just made me so, just nervous that some families were just not going to be able to make it. And I was hoping that we could, provide the resources or some kind of way that would be able to help them. And we did with providing breakfast and lunch so they could pick up at a certain location, social distancely in their cars and different things like that. So our district, definitely stepped up in that aspect. But I just really remember, are they going to be okay? Our family's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. How was your way of teaching students? And now you have a self-contained classroom, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So how was your way of teaching students, and in particular teaching writing literacy, writing/literacy, impacted or compromised in shifting from that physical pre-spring break learning style to distance learning, connections to students, disruptions in relationships, etc.? I hope that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am. I honestly, everything stopped. Everything stopped. There were so many guidelines and restrictions on how long you could be on a Zoom with the kids and how long instruction can be and just different things. And so for my class, unfortunately, like face-to-face live instruction literally stopped for the last 8 weeks of school or 6 weeks of school. I chose to use our Zoom and live time just to connect with them. So I sent them out an invitation and offered them to meet with me on Thursday evenings, just so that we could, what we call circle up. Every morning we used to come into the classroom after they had breakfast, and we would sit in a circle and we would just share good news and share little stories and different things like that. And I just felt like that was most important, or the best way I could use that Zoom time, rather than trying to literally instruct at a time when, so many things had changed. So the literacy instruction from me ceased. The district's Seesaw lessons that they implemented did continue with giving students videos and anchor charts and the as much instruction as they could give them in that platform so that they could still read and respond to reading or to something that they had read in writing, and they could still write. It was a bit of a heartbreak for me as a teacher writer as well, because in my classroom, I had started notebooks, and having learned a little bit more about what notebooking is and what it can be, I wanted my kids to kind of have that. And we had started implementing about a 10 or 15 minute time each day where, much like your deer, drop everything and read, we would literally drop everything and write, and they could just write about anything they wanted to write about. And so that stopped. And it made me a little bit sad, but I was glad to be able to have the time to connect with the kids that were able to get on the Zoom once a week. And, constant communication with the parents, but not a lot of instruction to answer the question, physical live instruction. It pretty much ceased.
But it sounds to me like you continued to your main focus was maintaining those relationships and checking in on the well-being of the students and families.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. What was the impact of technology and remote teaching? Well, I think you've kind of answered this in a way, but I'll go ahead and read the question and you can just add if you'd like to.
Okay.
What was the impact of technology and remote teaching? I guess that's the question. I think you've kind of answered that, though. Let's go ahead and can you share a poem from this time period?
Yes. I have a poem called Dear Online Learning.
Oh, okay.
Dear Online Learning, I realize that you are not a novelty by any means. You were the method by which I obtained my teaching degree. But it is so different having to be on the creative side rather than on the user side. I now have become the producer of online instruction. And to be perfectly honest, this is hard. I can only imagine how the parents of my scholars must feel, having to learn to navigate apps, usernames, passwords, and downloads. Online learning, are you here to stay? Will this continue as the new landscape of education? I hope not. I miss the smiles of my scholars, their hugs, high fives, and handshakes. I know this is not your fault, online learning. You are the result of something so sinister that no one could ever have fathomed would occur in our lifetime. I guess, though, online learning, when I look at the bright side, many of us are learning new skills.
Wow. I like that you used apostrophe. You chose to address online learning as if, and personification, as if it's, as if it's a being.
Yeah.
It's almost become a being. And is it going to be being, like you ask, is it going to keep being?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Can you say a little bit, as you revisit this now, tell me what stands out the most to you in that poem?
I think the two lines, online learning, are you here to stay? Will this continue as the new landscape of education? Because at that moment, we did not know what was going to come of the virus and different things like that. And I was just wondering, will somebody in education decide, hey, we did this. Let's keep doing that, So I'm like, are you here? I hope not.
Yeah.
It was almost like in the I guess in the essence of us having to go to online learning because of the pandemic, hoping that somebody wouldn't look at it as like, oh, well, we can just continue to do it this way even after a pandemic, So I was hoping nobody would make that decision.
Right. Yeah, me too. How did your school year end? Let's jump to that. And
Okay.
What changes did you experience in your teaching practices? What changes did you experience in your relationship with students, families, and colleagues, if any?
The end of the year, I will admit, was a bit of a blur. as we were coming to an end, I do remember just being told over and over, give your families grace, give your family grace, check the schools, the students' work, check on your kids, make sure you're taking attendance. And then as it ended, it felt like it just kind of ended. Mm-hmm. I remember having the final Thursday night Zoom meeting, the Circle Up meeting with my scholars, and maybe 3 or 4 scholars had signed on. And I just remember, just as I always did, telling them that I missed them, telling them that I loved them, hoping that they would have a wonderful summer, making sure they had my cell phone number if they wanted to call, just so that, I don't know, maybe they knew how much their connection meant to me and our relationship meant, but just also wanted to make sure that they knew how much they meant to me. Like I really loved that group of kids. And so the final, work-related administrative thing that I remember was just making sure we contacted every parent to let them know your child is going to 3rd grade. Like there was nothing we could do, whether they showed up to work, whether they did or did not do any work at all, because under the circumstances, it was just so new and we all were kind of like building the plane while we were flying it. So it was just like, hey, don't worry. We know this was crazy. Your child is going to 3rd grade. And then it was summer and it was, it was done. Mm-hmm. So I just, I don't know, I just remember lots of phone calls and emails and touching base with parents. I remember one phone call from a parent whose daughter was worried and wanted to know if she could call me if she needed to during the summer. And of course I was like, yes, of course. Mm-hmm. And she had blossomed so much throughout the school year, only child. So I didn't hear from her, but it was, I guess it felt good to me that she wanted to know that if she could contact me. And so it was,
mm-hmm.
I felt
absolutely. Yeah. You made an impact.
Yeah.
Is there anything, if you could, that you would go back and change?
I often wonder if, my learning curve with the whole Zoom and live instruction, if I could have gotten better at it sooner, could I possibly have made a different impact with, the scholars who could get on and who had access and different things like that. Honestly, I believe that at the time, our district really did the best it could under the circumstances, trying to ensure that every child had access to technology, had access to internet. So for me personally, I can only say I hope that, what I did was good enough, but I think I would have loved to had more live interaction with my scholars than I did.
Was there a silver lining at all to any of it?
I honestly can't say that there was. It was a very hard time, and I'll take that back. I think the silver lining in it was just that I was able to keep some connection with families and my scholars. And I guess the second silver lining was as I said at the end of the poem, we were learning new skills. Like I know that I learned to do some things that I didn't know how to do before, maybe not so much with the Zoom, but, just even with lessons and creating seesaw lessons, like my skills definitely increased in that respect. Mm-hmm. And so even now with us doing the hybrid, it has helped because this is how we're still implementing instruction and learning for right now. So I would say those two things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And is there a poem that you could share with us that kind of corresponds to the end of the year? Or that maybe it, it's just one that speaks to you now.
Yes, ma'am. It's this one is actually a poem that was written based on "We Are Cool" by Gwendolyn Brooks, and I think they call this one a reverse golden shovel because the words to her poem are down the left at the beginning as opposed to the end. So it says, "We are doing hard things that are real hard to understand and have us losing our cool, enhancing our skill sets so we can deliver what our scholars need, having nothing left sometimes, but try as we might to keep school as normal as possible. We push online learning despite the fears that lurk beneath the surface of it all, fearing it's too late to meet their diverse needs. We try to extend grace to ourselves and others as we strike against the status quo, straight toward the unknown. We are the champions of doing more with less, so we sing our own praises for our valiant efforts. There's no sin in being unsure and pressing on when we are all learning to fly the plane, because there is a thin line between, no, it's wide as hell, trying to score like in gin rummy and not lose this game. We dig deep and search long and hard to jazz up our current circumstance, praying we make it to June, uncertain of how long we will work under these conditions, do or die, right or wrong, longing for an end to this."
That is just beautiful.
Thank you.
That just mirrors exactly what you just said. Is there any one line that that just jumped out at you just now?
I think my favorite line is kind of the combination of there's no sin in being unsure and pressing on when we are all learning on the fly. I think that's what the line actually says, learning on the fly instead of learning to fly the plane. Because there's a thin line between, no, it's wide as hell. I mean, it felt like there was no thin line. It was like there was just this huge chasm between what we were intending and wanting and hoping we were going to be able to achieve with our scholars and how we felt we were doing at that, at achieving that. So yeah, I think that's my favorite part of that poem.
Mm-hmm. I love the gin rummy, the comparison, trying to score like in gin rummy and not lose this game. I love that.
Thank you.
Well, if we talk about the current state of COVID-19 in Texas and in Arlington, where you are, what is teaching like for you now? And you've mentioned this briefly, but if you could just expound upon that.
Yes, ma'am. So currently, like I said, it's a hybrid model. Some scholars inside, some scholars at home. We still have restrictions on how much live time we can have. However, we are allotted basically 2 hours a day. So we have to kind of divvy that up between reading instruction and math instruction, which are mandatory, and then small group instruction in reading and math. Unfortunately, as a teacher writer, it breaks my heart that there's not a lot of writing instruction happening right now. But we're also trying our best to ensure that we are not overloading our parents, because we realize that for the ones at home, their learning and their instruction and any support they're getting is from somebody at home, if somebody is at home. So we have limited, it to basically reading, math, science and social studies is asynchronous. And so we embed a lot of videos, anchor charts, anything that we can find that is public, that is allowed to be, implemented so that we can at least give them the information in science and social studies. Currently, my team and I just started kind of trying to implement a little bit of writing through the content areas where the kids have a notebook at home. And so 1 or 2 lessons throughout the week in each content area may ask them, like, rather than recording your voice to answer this question, write it on paper and take a picture and upload it. So they can at least are getting some of the being able to express themselves and express their learning and what they understand in writing in some kind of way. Although I would love it if they could be able to like kind of do the creative writing and the more of the writing instruction. So really that's what learning and teaching looks like right now in our district. And the teachers who teach 3rd grade through 12th grade use Canvas. And because Canvas actually is more compatible with like Google and things like that, they kind of have a little bit more access and different things that they can do. Seesaw kind of limits us a little bit, but our kids are used to it, and they just do a fabulous job with learning and showing what they know in that platform.
Is your school a one-to-one school?
Yes.
Okay. So what devices do your students have?
So K or pre-K through 2nd grade, you typically have iPads, have like the mini iPads.
Okay.
Normally 3rd grade through 12th grade have Chromebooks. I do have a 2nd grader who has a Chromebook, and I think was the device that either his parents chose when they were able to pick up devices when they were being given out. So he's learned really well how to use that Chromebook, which typically they don't really get access to that until 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, how about you? Let's talk about your writing life, your connections to other teachers. I know you mentioned that you're part of a writing group.
Yes.
So your writing life, your connection to other teachers through writing, what it has meant for you to have kind of that third space between school and home, this writing space. What's that like now?
A couple of summers ago, I was introduced to a group called Time to Write through the Teach Write LLC that is hosted by Jennifer Lafine. And I've gotten more involved since, I would say probably in December of 2019. And so that group, we meet several times a week just to write with each other, express ideas, share. So having that group has, one, not only helped me grow as a writer, which is important to me, but has given me connection with other teachers who are pretty much going through the same thing I was going through, regardless of what state we were in. Each one of us had, our state is doing this and our state is doing that. And I can't believe our governor did this. Oh, great, our governor did that. Just kind of that camaraderie. A great group of teacher writers who truly believe that writing, teachers who write, not that they're necessarily better in that a teacher who doesn't write can't teach writing well, but we just have, I think, we have just different experiences that we can relate to when it comes to our student writers, because we write and we go through the process and we go through the struggle. And so that has been just a comfort, honestly, to me. There, I think I'm honestly there we can meet 4 times a week, and I'm there all 4 times. Like, that is just something that has really been part of helping me with that sanity piece, to just, be able to communicate and talk to adults that, have the same feelings I do, who, or who even may not, but can help me even, through my thoughts and feelings and different things like that. So it's been a great place to be with those teacher writers. It also keeps me writing every day, if it's nothing more than a notebook page about something that has happened. I have participated in the Slice of Life with the 2 writing teachers that happens on Tuesdays, and they have the month-long challenge in March. So that's where you pretty much just kind of take a snippet of your day, you blog about it on your own blog post, and then you can upload it to their page for other teacher writers and bloggers to read and comment. And it's been it's just been impactful to read other people's stories and little pieces of their day, especially, when it's from a teacher who has had this experience or that experience. And it's like, oh, I remember reading somewhere it's like, oh, I'm a little bit jealous because, they're back in the classroom and they get to teach their kids writing and they're hyper just like me. I know exactly how that feels, so it's like you just kind of you're able to resonate, you're able to just feel what they feel. No, you're not in this alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think the fact that, and this is all done online, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you think, I guess my thought is, to me, as much as it would be nice to meet people that we're talking to online,
Mm-hmm.
it's also kind of freeing to know that, I don't know, to me, the online relationship frees me up anyway to be more of myself. I don't know if that makes any sense. Does that make any sense? I mean,
it really does. Yes, it really does. Because you feel like, I don't know, maybe you have this set amount of time. You are with people that you enjoy being with. And it's like, when I'm with the group, I feel no judgment. So I I know that, they are there for me and I'm there for them. So it's like, I can just be myself, say what I need to say, even if it's sometimes off the cuff and a little left, because honestly, we're just, we get each other. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree.
Yeah. And then there's, they're not going to go run into the principal saying, did you hear what so-and-so said?
Yes. So, exactly.
What, if any, benefits do you think are going to come out of COVID-19 in understanding literacy teaching and learning for teachers and students? And then there's a little parenthetical statement regarding equity, access, emotional well-being, teacher communities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So how are we going to grow from COVID-19 in regard to teaching and learning, and in particular with literacy?
That is a really good question. And I sat with that question for a little bit because I reflected on some of the experiences that other teachers in other states are having, with some being completely back in the classroom, some going back and forth between in person and back home, and just different things. And I honestly, I don't know what impact this is going to have, because from what I hear from other teachers, I think some states are doing it really well with their guidelines, like teachers who are really being able to really teach the reading and writing together. Whereas I feel like with us, we're just a little bit more limited. And even if they're hybrid, they're still able to to get in those lessons and different things like that. I'm hoping that we maybe learn a better way to figure out how teaching reading and writing can be done if we have to be, in this remote environment, with whether it's with resources, access to resources, just access mainly for the scholars at home to have, so that they can have the books or access to some a reading passage or just different things. I do believe equity will probably always be an issue, and I just say that because we are who we are. There's people who have, people who don't have, and so I know that I do believe that kind of will always be an issue. I do believe, though, that I'd like to think that my district actually did the very best it could to ensure that, at least when it came to devices and internet access, we gave out, what do you call those little remote portals? The hotspots, yes. And so I really feel like that we did a good job of trying to ensure that we provided families with what they needed to help them continue their child's education, especially, if they were going to be at home. Mm-hmm. I know that I am looking forward to the time that we can get back in the classroom. And I believe that as we transition back into that, I think one thing that we have definitely learned is how to implement technology in instruction. I just hope it doesn't continue to be the primary way that we provide instruction. I told my GT teacher a little joke. I said, I remember years before the pandemic, it would, you'd be teaching and it'd be like, don't forget to implement, technology, make sure they're on their iPad. And now it's like, okay, we're doing all technology. Don't forget to implement writing and pencil and paper. And I'm like, I kind of feel like we can't win for losing, but I know maybe we will come out of this understanding how to balance the two now that we've done it one way where it's like, okay, you got to use technology. And now it's like, okay, we've used all this technology. Okay, I think we can balance it and figure out how to make both work together.
Yeah. Is there a poem that you wrote that is particularly meaningful to you that you would like to share before we close out?
Yes, ma'am. I have one last poem. I did not title this one, but this was the poem that I wrote just kind of as I started reflecting on my routine throughout the pandemic and also wanting to make sure I had time to write. So it says, wake up, trot downstairs to make the drink that will give me energy. Read and post the scripture of the day. The word of God gives me life. Practice Spanish via an app. Hopefully I will be fluent before I die. Read the corresponding date of my daily Bible. There's no such thing as too much God. Pray. Work out for an hour or take a 3-mile walk. Moving my body is important to me. Shower and dress. Pajamas count, right? Prepare breakfast and multitask for work. Technically on the clock at 8:45. Review scholarly work. Plan for sending out more. Make contact with parents. Try to make this hard thing simple. Do the best you can. Emails, check and respond. Eat something that is supposed to be lunch. Don't judge me. Continue the work cycle until I can't take it anymore. Planning, reaching out to parents, reviewing activities, checking emails. As dusk approaches, but often not until the dark of night, I finally sit down away from the must do, preparing my mind to focus on the get to do, the want to do. Notebook open, pens by my side, drawing a blank on what to write.
Well, I don't think you drew a blank at all.
Thank you.
I just think that's beautiful. And I feel like I've learned a lot, even though, I'm going through this myself. I feel like I've learned a lot from you.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm certainly going to check out Time to Write. And so I just thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, thank you for this opportunity. Every year I pick one little word, and my one little word this year, honestly, was fearless, because I get very nervous about speaking in front of people, about publishing my writing. And so I've decided that this year I'm just going to do things that scare me, and I'm going to do them fearlessly. So I really just appreciate this opportunity. And I hope that my contribution just makes, all of the contributions make an impact going forward on the world, because we teachers do a lot. And this was just a really great opportunity. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And just go forth fearless.
Thank you. I will.
Take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.